Okay, welcome back to Ministry of the Bride, Part 3. There's a lot that we could look at and go through in all of this to prove these things, but this is painting the picture large. And we don't have a year to go through it in detail. We may have a year, but I don't believe we have a year on YouTube or a year with our power. By the way, how many of you have heard how they're warning us the power is going to go out? Biden is openly saying power is going to go out. How many of you just saw that in Phoenix it was 122 yesterday? How many of you saw that they just almost tripled their power bills? And that their power is so high now all of a sudden they can't afford to, a lot of people can't afford to run their AC. Can't afford it. And 122 degrees. There's a lot of apartments now, apartment buildings in Phoenix, they become chimneys. Yeah. I don't know how people can survive. I don't know. Things are coming down very fast. How many of you just read about Norway, by the way? Did you hear about Norway? Norway now has the means, and they're doing it. They are electronically watching every single purchase, and it's being turned into them of everybody at the grocery store every day. Why do you suppose? Because they want to know who's buying a lot of extra. Why? So in the days ahead, they can go and confiscate it and redistribute it the way that they want to. What you see happening there is going to happen to us. And that's why I keep telling anybody that'll listen, buy now. You're already almost too late. Buy now, quickly while you can. Because the day's coming, you won't. And you won't want to buy extra because they will be tracking you. Things are happening fast. So let me ask you, with these things happening this fast, and they're openly proclaiming the mark of the beast, that it's coming very soon. How soon is it before the spring comes and the outpouring begins on the crier church, and she comes alive and she's leaning on the everlasting arms and she's taking back to her mother's house? How soon before that happens? Probably this coming spring. That's what I believe. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. I believe this coming spring, at the time of Passover, in the spring. I believe that that's when the outpouring, or somewhere right in that time period. Okay. Let's go further on. Revelation chapter 12. Let's go there. Revelation chapter 12. I'm just going to read a few verses. This is an incredible picture here. It's one of the most fascinating portions of Scripture that I know of. And it is so misunderstood by the church. It's just amazing. Understand something, basic ground rules here, okay, about the book of Revelations. It claims in 3 different places that it is a book of prophecy. The word prophecy means to speak beforehand. In other words, to speak about what is going to happen before it happens. Okay, that is prophecy, and it is only of God. The devil cannot speak beforehand. That's why the devil does not understand prophecy. Okay? The Lord has poured out knowledge to his saints. But even the angels long to look and understand those things and don't understand them because he's reserved it for us. The book of Revelation is a book of prophecy, not a book of history. And so many Bible teachers, expositors, and commentators will sit there and say, oh, portions of it are history. No, it's not. It was prophecy in 90 AD, 90 years after the birth of Christ, 60 years after he began ministry. It was prophecy. It began becoming fulfilled immediately in John's day because the first church age that is mentioned was John's day. But it would go all the way through to the end. It is prophecy all the way to the end of the rest of humanity. Chapter 12, on my Bible here, in a small commentary section, it says, the woman is Israel. No, it's not. The woman is the church. The woman is not Israel here. This description never happened to Israel. The male child, Christ. Sorry, you're wrong again, because this never happened to Jesus. The only place where they get it right is beginning in verse 7 when it says the angel Michael. Well, yeah. How come they got that right? Well, because the context says that it was Michael that fought against the devil. So they got that one right. But let's look at it. Verse 1, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Now, I talk about this in detail in other places. I'm just going to go over it quickly for you here. Understand it says a great sign. With that, for your notes, Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, where we're told that the sun, moon, and stars will be given for signs and for seasons. You see, at the very beginning of our creation, the Lord told righteous Seth, the third born from Adam and Eve, the whole history of the world in the constellations, and gave that to him. And Seth passed it down through the ages, and even the Arabs to this day still carry on that tradition. The Greeks and others took that teaching and changed it to depict their gods. But the symbols are still right. They're still the same. Okay? They're just not Greek gods. The Greeks did that. God gave it because the history of the creation is in those signs. Isn't that amazing? The history of the creation is there. There's a wonderful book written by a Baptist minister called The Gospel in the Stars. And he talks about it. He goes through the history and he shows this is the gospel. They had a rough understanding of the gospel all the way from righteous Seth all the way down. Isn't that amazing? So here's this sign. So it's a sign. It's an astrological sign. Now, an astrological sign tells us signs and seasons. Okay? So this is the beginning of a season. This is what it's telling us. The woman is como Bernice, is Virgo the Virgin, clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. The 12 stars is como Bernice. This sign is seen. Remember, all signs that are seen have to be seen in order to be valid from the center of the earth. There's one place on the earth where you can stand right there and look up, and that's where you can tell what the signs are. No other place on earth, it won't matter. That one place, the Bible tells us, is the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem. So this is a sign seen from Jerusalem. This sign is seen every single year on the first day of the Hebrew month Tishri, usually our September, October. And on the first of Tishri, if you look up from the city of Jerusalem, if there isn't clouds in the sky, you will see Virgo the Virgin. The sun is up, clothing her. Above her head is Como Bernice, and the moon is setting under her feet. Isn't that amazing? Now, if you pull out your cell phone and you have your astrological program on it, there's some really nice free ones. It's a fun thing to do. You can hold it flat and you can see true north and south. You can also see the whole ecliptic of our solar system. And you can see all of the constellations. And so if you're standing in Jerusalem and you pull your cell phone out and look, even if it's cloudy, you can see, okay, right there is Virgo. There's Como Bernice. And underneath Virgo, which is underneath the mountain, guess what's down there? Draco the dragon. At the feet of the woman is the dragon. And it's waiting to capture her child that's born, the moment it's born. So her feet are there, and right underneath her, ready to capture that baby, is Draco the dragon. This is seen every year on the first day of Tishri, which, by the way, is the birthday of the world. It was the day the world was created. It's the real birthday. Verse 2, this sign now changes to a metaphor. And she was with child. Well, the real astrological sign doesn't show a child. So now it's become a metaphor. And a metaphor of what? What does a woman represent? The church. The church, not Israel. It's the church. Remember, the Lord is not dealing with Israel yet. The Lord's still dealing with the church. We're still in the church ages. When does the Lord begin dealing with Israel? Well, right after Laodicea is slaughtered. Then the Lord begins dealing with Israel, and only a remnant ends up being saved at the second coming. Okay, she's with child. What does it mean she's with child? Well, this takes us back to the Song of Solomon. The woman is laying underneath the apple tree with child, ready to give birth. Same time period. She's cried out being in labor and in pain to give birth. We've talked about this before. The word labor in the Greek literally means struggling within. The word pain to give birth is literally being tormented from without. So there's a struggle within her, between her and the baby, and there's somebody on the outside poking her with a stick saying, get rid of that child. Well, we know that's the dragon, right? That's the devil trying to make her birth that baby. So this is the time period. Now notice, we know the season. The season is the first of Tishri, also called Rosh Hashanah. The first day of Rosh Hashanah is blown with trumpets. And that's in celebration of the birthday of the world, when the angels all sang and blew trumpets when God created the heavens and the earth. Isn't that amazing? 10 days later is the Feast of Atonement, when God made atonement for Adam and Eve's sin and slew 2 lambs and put their bloody skins around their waist so that they were driven out of the Garden of Eden on the blood-sprinkled way. As the blood dripped off the skins and on the ground and down their legs, they were driven out on the blood-sprinkled way. That's why the scripture says that we come back on the blood-sprinkled way. This time we go back into Eden with the blood of Christ that provides the way. One time for all. Verse 3, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his heads were 7 diadems. So now we have a mixture. We have a literal sign that is also a metaphor. Isn't that amazing? For what? For the beast, for the dragon, which is the devil, but also the kingdoms that he has ruled. The kingdoms that he has ruled. Beginning with Egypt. Right after the flood. Ancient Egypt was the world empire for a long time, and the devil was behind it, and Pharaoh ran the world. There's been 7. I believe we're in the 7th kingdom right now. Right now. Notice the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 horns, each horn represents a power or a powerful person. And not because they have kingdoms. Revelations tells us they don't have kingdoms, but they have the power of a king. All right, the power of a king is his money. These 10 horns are 10 individuals that have great power through their money. Gates, Soros, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. There's 10 of them all together. They're part of his kingdom. And 7 diadems. Diadems mean victor's wreaths. So he has won 7 kingdoms so far. I believe right now we're in the 7th kingdom. Understand the time that puts us in. We're in the 7th kingdom right now. That means there's a final Antichrist coming still. And I believe they're getting the current one set up so that he will fall. And the final one will take his place. Verse 4, and his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. Then verse 5, and she gave birth to a son, a male child. It's literally a man-child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. People say, oh, this male child is Christ. No, you don't understand. It shows us later on that this child is also an army of people. It's a huge group of people. Isaiah 66 shows us, like a nation being born in one day. This male child is also known as the bride of Christ. 2 different pictures, 2 different metaphors showing 2 different aspects of this group. Bride is like a bride prepared for a groom. Okay, male child, literally man-child, is that it stands up the moment it's born, already fully mature, already ready to do battle with their enemy, already ready to go out and to minister, already made like a 30-year-old. Because if it's a child, they're not allowed to minister. They're considered a child up to 29 years old. That's why Jesus could not go out and minister until his 30th birthday. It was on his birthday, brethren, that he was water baptized. That was at the Feast of Atonement on the 10th day of Tishri. A few days later, it was his birthday. So he was water baptized. He went out in the desert and was tested and came back ready to begin his ministry, his public ministry, because he began his public ministry on his birthday, the moment he was 30 years old. So this is depicted here as a man-child because it will be fully mature, which means it is as though they were 30 years old and ready to begin ministry. It has to be a male child of 30 years old to be sent out in ministry. And it shows, the reason it shows them as a male child and not as a bride is because they're being sent out to minister like a priest, like Jesus, like John the Baptist. And we'll talk about that ministry on our next YouTube. Lord bless you.